Please, we need help. Thank you for letting us in.
Alright, come inside. You can rest here.
Levi had walked this road 100 times before. The 2 miles between the grocery store and the trailer where he lived with his mother. It was a familiar path, worn by years of his own footsteps, lined with scrub pines and the rusted skeletons of cars that had died and been abandoned. But today, the sky had turned against him. The clouds rolled in from the west like an army on the march, swallowing the afternoon sun, turning the world to twilight. He tightened his grip on the grocery bag, eggs, milk, the medicine his mother needed, and began to walk faster. The rain started as a drizzle, then a downpour, then something that felt like the sky itself collapsing. Levi pulled his hood up, hunched his shoulders, and kept walking. The road turned to mud beneath his sneakers, the water rising around his ankles. He was halfway home, the trailer park still a mile ahead, and the storm was getting worse by the minute. He thought about his mother, waiting for him, probably worrying, and he pushed himself harder, his legs burning, his lungs aching with the effort of moving through the wall of water. He almost missed it. The small shape huddled at the base of a pine tree, half hidden by the branches, so small it might have been a sack of groceries someone had dropped. But something made him stop, made him turn, made him look closer. And then he saw the face small, pale, streaked with rain and tears, and his heart stopped. It was a child, a toddler, no more than 3 years old, dressed in thin pajamas and tiny boots, shivering so hard the branches around him were shaking. Levi dropped the grocery bag and ran. Hey, it's okay. I've got you. Levi knelt in the mud, pulling the child into his arms, feeling the small body trembling against his chest. The boy he could see now it was a boy looked up at him with enormous brown eyes, his lips blue with cold, his fingers like ice. He wasn't crying anymore. That was the worst part. He was too cold to cry. Levi stripped off his jacket, wrapped it around the child, held him close. What's your name, buddy? Where's your mama? But the boy just stared, his teeth chattering, too frozen to speak. Levi looked around, his mind racing. The road was empty in both directions. The rain so thick he could barely see 10 feet ahead. No cars, no houses, nothing but the pines and the rising water, and this tiny boy who had appeared out of nowhere. The grocery bag was already ruined, the eggs broken, the milk leaking into the mud. His mother's medicine was somewhere in the mess, but he couldn't think about that now. He couldn't think about anything except getting this child out of the storm. He lifted the boy onto his hip and began to walk. The nearest house was at least 2 miles away, a farm he had passed 100 times, a place with a big porch and a light that was always on. He didn't know who lived there, didn't know if they would help, but it was the only chance they had. The boy was heavy in his arms, heavier than he looked, and Levi's legs were already trembling with exhaustion. The rain had soaked through his shirt, through his jeans, through everything. But he kept walking, one foot in front of the other, holding the child against his chest, feeling the small heartbeat against his own. The farmhouse appeared through the rain like a ghost, its porch light a faint glow in the gray twilight. Levi staggered up the driveway, his legs giving out beneath him, and collapsed against the porch railing. He banged on the door with a fist that felt like it belonged to someone else. "Please," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Please, somebody help." The door opened, and a woman stood there, her face pale, her eyes going wide at the sight of him, a boy, soaking wet, holding a child who should not have been out in this weather. "Dear God, is that Emily's boy?" The woman pulled them inside, her hands trembling as she took the child from Levi's arms. She wrapped him in a blanket, rubbed his hands, spoke to him in a voice that was trying to be calm and failing. Levi stood in the doorway, dripping onto her clean floor, watching as she worked to warm the child. "He was by the road," he said, his voice hoarse. "I found him under a tree. I didn't know where else to bring him." The woman looked at him, and there was something in her eyes, gratitude, yes, but also fear. "This is the McCullough boy," she said. wrapping the blanket tighter around the child. He lives up the road. His father, she stopped, looked at Levi, seemed to be measuring something. His father is a man you don't want to cross. He's gonna want to know how his son got out in this storm. The boy Tommy, the woman called him, had started to cry now, soft, exhausted whimpers that broke Levi's heart. He knelt beside the child, took his small hand. "I'll take him home," Levi said. "I found him. I'll take him back." The woman tried to stop him, said she would call someone, said he should wait until the storm passed. But Levi's already lifting Tommy into his arms, already moving toward the door. The boy needed his father. He needed to be home. And Levi had walked this far. He could walk a little further. The woman gave him directions, a quarter-mile up the road, a gate with a faded mailbox, a house set back from the road. Levi nodded, pulled his wet jacket back over the boy, and stepped back into the storm. The gate was where she said it would be, the mailbox leaning, the driveway a ribbon of mud leading into the trees. Levi pushed through, his arms aching, his feet numb, the boy's head resting against his shoulder. The house was dark when he first saw it, just a shape in the rain. But as he got closer, he saw a light in the window, and then the door burst open, and a man came running out. He was tall, broad, his face twisted with a fear that Levi recognized, the fear of a parent who didn't know where their child was. Tommy, thank God. The man took the boy from Levi's arms, held him against his chest, buried his face in the child's wet hair. Levi stood in the rain, swaying on his feet, watching the reunion with a relief so deep it made his knees weak. The man was crying, Levi realized. This big, broad man was crying. And then the man looked up, and his eyes met Levi's, and something in his face changed. The relief was still there, but something else was there too. Recognition, and something that looked like fear. "You." The word came out like a blow. Levi took a step back, confused, afraid. "I found him by the road," he said quickly. "He was under a tree. He was cold, but I got him here as fast as I could." The man was staring at him, his arms still wrapped around the boy, his face pale beneath his beard. "I know who you are," the man said, and his voice was strange, rough. "I know your mother. I know things you don't understand." Levi shook his head, water dripping from his hair into his eyes. I don't know what you mean." The man led him inside, sat him by the fire, gave him dry clothes that were too big and a blanket that smelled like wood smoke. Tommy was sleeping now, wrapped in his father's arms, his face peaceful. Levi sat in the chair by the hearth, watching the flames, trying to understand what was happening. The man, his name was Caleb, he said, kept looking at him, kept opening his mouth to speak and then closing it again. Finally, he set Tommy on the couch, turned to face Levi, and said the words that would change everything. "I knew your father." Levi's father had died when he was 5 years old. A truck accident on a wet highway, a closed casket, a mother who never spoke of him again. Levi had grown up with a photograph and a silence that had become a wall between him and his past. And now this man, this stranger whose child he had just carried through a storm, was telling him that he had known his father, known him well, had worked beside him, had been there when the truck went off the road, had been the one who pulled him from the wreckage, had watched him die in his arms. The room seemed to tilt around Levi. He gripped the arms of the chair, his knuckles white, his breath coming in gasps. "You were there," he whispered. "You were there when he died." Caleb nodded, his face wet with tears that were not just for tonight, not just for the child who had been lost in the storm. "I tried to save him," he said, his voice breaking. "I tried, but the wreck was too bad. He was gone before the ambulance got there. I've carried that with me every day for 12 years. And I've watched you from a distance, watched you grow up, watched you take care of your mother. I wanted to reach out, but I didn't know how." Levi stood up, his legs unsteady, his heart pounding. He looked at Caleb, at the man who had held his father as he died, at the man who had known the truth about that night and never told him. Anger rose in his chest, hot and fast, and for a moment, he wanted to scream, to hit something, to make this man feel the pain he had carried for 12 years. But then he looked at Tommy, sleeping on the couch, his small face peaceful, and the anger drained away. "You have a son," Levi said, his voice quiet. "You gotta watch him grow up. My father didn't get that. My mother didn't get that. But you carried that guilt. That's its own kind of prison." They sat in silence for a long time, the fire crackling, the rain still hammering against the windows. Caleb told him the whole story, how he and Levi's father had been best friends, how they had worked together, how the accident had been an act of God, no one's fault. He told Levi about the years of guilt, the drinking, the almost losing his own family. He told him about the day Tommy was born and how he had looked at his son and known that he had to stop running from the past. "I should have come to you," he said. "I should have told you who I was. But I was afraid you would hate me." Levi looked at this man, this stranger who had been part of his life without his knowledge, who had carried the weight of his father's death for 12 years, who had just trusted him with his own child. And he made a choice. "I don't hate you," he said, and the words surprised him even as he said them. "I spent my whole life not knowing what happened, not knowing if my father was alone when he died. Now I know he wasn't. He had a friend with him, someone who tried to save him. That's more than I had before." Caleb's face crumpled, and for a moment, the big man looked like a child himself. The storm passed in the night, and in the morning, the world was washed clean. The sky a pale, soft blue, the air so fresh, it seemed like the first day of creation. Levi stood on the porch, his borrowed jacket wrapped around him, looking out at a road he had walked 100 times, but would never see the same way again. Caleb came out with Tommy in his arms, the boy's face bright, his eyes curious. "You want to come back sometime?" Caleb asked, his voice rough. "To talk, to know more about your father." Levi looked at the man who had saved his father's memory, who had trusted him with his son, who was offering him something he had never had, a connection to the man he had lost. "Yeah," he said, and for the first time in 12 years, the weight on his chest felt a little lighter. "I'd like that." He walked down the driveway, the gravel crunching under his borrowed boots, and when he looked back, Caleb was still standing on the porch, Tommy waving from his arms. Levi waved back, and in that moment, a boy who had spent his life feeling alone realized that he had never been alone at all. His father had been there, in the stories he hadn't heard, in the friend who had carried his memory, in the child who had been lost in a storm and found by a boy who was finally, after all these years, finding his way home.